Beans, the magical fruit. The more you eat, the less you toot. What do you think about my twist on the traditional nursery rhyme about beans? Hello, thank you for joining me for Veg with Lisa Live. I'm Lisa, this is most definitely live. Please, before we get started, however, let me know that you can see me and that you can hear me. Hi, Cousin Mildred. I'm so glad you're here today. I've got you in mind in this episode. I hope that everyone can hear me today. My crack audio equipment wouldn't connect, so I'm just going to have to project very loudly. Do you ever have those days? Is Mercury in retrograde or something? Anyway, as I was singing before today on Veg with Lisa, hi Lori, I'm very enamored with beans these days. And beans are indeed a magical fruit. I don't know that they're really a fruit. They're maybe a legume, but I didn't look up the genus. Mary Ann, it's great to see you. Oh my gosh. So the old-fashioned nursery rhyme goes, beans, the magical fruit, the more you eat, the more you chew. However, in my experience, that is not always the case. That often the more beans, plants, fiber in general we eat, the better our gut is. We heal our gut and we're better able to digest these things that often tend to cause us problems. But that maybe is for another conversation that I'm happy to have with you. In the meantime, I want to show you how to make brothy white beans with herbs and miso and a fresh squeeze of lemon. You're absolutely gonna love these beans. So let's get started, shall we? Look at these, aren't these so cool? I'm gonna tell you more about the special kind of beans that I'm cooking with as soon as I get started. So I've got my beautiful red pot on the stove and I'm gonna turn my heat on. So I'm gonna make these brothy beans. It starts with sauteing a bunch of aromatics, and remember that's simply a fancy French word for things that smell good when you saute them. Just a little bit of olive oil. And I'm so glad Cousin Mildred is in the house because to my soup pot, I'm going to add some onions. And this particular recipe, which I got off of The First Mess, which is a really fantastic plant-based recipe blog, also had shallots. Well, I thought it was a little odd to have two kinds of onions, but since I have them, I'm going to toss them in. And the reason I'm glad Cousin Mildred is in the house is because she noticed on a recipe or two prior, that I didn't use a lot of, or any onions and garlic, and we had a really great conversation about it offline. I am absolutely going to use onions and garlic and shallots in this, and it's, again, another topic for conversation, but I think it's good to be mindful of using these vegetables in the Ayurvedic tradition, which is the sister science to yoga. They're used in real moderation. However, we know that they're really, really good for us too. So we kind of got to play it. If your digestion, if your gut can handle them and you feel okay when you eat them and they don't agitate you, you don't find them too heating or the taste too, like you taste them all day, great, by all means use them. If you are noticing some reaction to having them in your cooking, maybe cut back. Anyway, long-winded way of saying I'm putting onions, shallots, and garlic into my soup pot for my beans. Also gonna add some celery, and you'll notice I've got the leaves. Can you hear my pot heating up here? I hope so. So again, I'm just cooking up some aromatics as a base for my brothy beans. I'm gonna add just a pinch of salt to this. I'm not gonna add too much salt because I am gonna stir in some miso in a bit, and miso has a lot of salt and is kind of salty, so we don't wanna overdo it. It's not really great to have a ton of sodium, but we do know that we get most of our excess sodium from fast food, processed food, convenience foods, not our home cooking. All right, let's see what else. Okay, this is an addition that I made. So I mentioned I got the inspiration for this recipe from The First Mess, but I can't help keeping my fingers out of my own pot. And I think fennel is going to be a fantastic addition to this, especially with all the onions and the garlic. Fennel is kind of a nice cooling vegetable, a little bit sweet. Yeah, so so I'm just gonna let that simmer for a moment while I tell you about my beans. So these specific beans actually are this really fancy schmancy kind called tupperary beans. And they are a Native American food. They're grown not only in the southwestern part of the US, but they're also grown in Mexico. So I should say Native North American food, not exclusive to the Americans. Mildred, don't worry, you can use any kind of white beans if you can't find these fancy schmancy beans. But one thing that I love about this fancy schmancy kind of bean is their nutritional profile. One serving of these beans has 21 grams of protein. 21 grams of protein. Ask me where I get my protein. And 52 grams of fiber, which is why they might make some of you toot. But again, I love to see if you eat more beans if the tooting subsides. All right, so that's what I'm going to use in my recipe. You can use any kind of beans. I love buying heirloom beans, organic beans, whenever possible. So that's what I'm using today. All right, let's see, what have I got going here? Okay, so the aromatics are cooking up quite nicely, so I'm going to add some spices, some fancy things. I still had some thyme in that I picked out of my garden and just kind of hung it to dry. So I'm going to toss that in. You can use dried thyme or fresh thyme if you have it. And same with the sage. Miso is new to Cousin Mildred. Awesome. I'll show you what to do with that in a minute, Mildred. Miso is a fantastic addition to your repertoire. So a little bit of sage that I have dried over from the winter. A bay leaf. Notice I'm just tossing all these things in. And then also I've got some smoked paprika, some oregano, because I didn't have any fresh oregano that I had wintered, or that I had dried. It doesn't seem to do that as well as the other herbs. It's a little bit more delicate. And some crushed red chilies for Emily, even though she's not here. And yes, I'm adding these spices to the pot with the aromatics. A trick that I kind of got from Indian cooking. They do that. They use the oil and then the aromatics, and then they add the spices, and it toasts them nicely. It smells incredible when you're making this dish. Okay, now what about my beans? I told you all about these fancy tupperary beans that I cooked ahead of time. So one thing, especially when you're using these really, really high fiber beans, I always soak them overnight, one, to facilitate speedier cooking, and two, to help make it easier on your digestion. Then you also want to make sure that you get them cooked thoroughly. I soak these overnight and then I simmer them for a good part of the day. If you have an Instapot or a pressure cooker, you could probably use that. So I'm going to toss these in. And again, if you don't have access to these fancy beans, any kind of white beans will do. Oh, baby, baby. Beanie baby. And then I'm going to add some veggie stock. Woo! Here are the beans cooking. So I just want to give a quick shout about the veggie stock. I did have some homemade. If you don't, super easy to buy it in these aseptic containers. Be sure and read your ingredients. Hi, Tracy. So this, Trader Joe's, yeah, some people love them. I love some stuff about Trader Joe's. Not all of it's healthful. However, their veggie stock is a really great deal. It's clean. It doesn't have any sugar. Veggie stocks are often where nasty stuff hides. So just read your labels. This is another brand, and again, I'm not promoting any particular brand. I just like to promote Kettle and Fire. I like to promote clean ingredients, and this is another one. You want to check the sodium. You want to check for added sugars, added oils. Don't need those in your beans. Okay, so let's see. I think that's all that I need for now. Then I'm gonna put the lid on my pretty red soup pot that I got for Christmas. And I'm gonna switch things over. Hang with me. This is the pot of beans that I made earlier. Woo! And mamma mia, I still had them on the stove so you can see that they're still steaming. I'm getting a bean facial. So my glasses are fogging over. Let me see if I can show you. Oh, look at how they just got all silky and kind of creamy. I didn't add anything to that. That's just the starch from the beans coming off. And again, remember, any kind of white beans will do, but we don't need to be afraid of eating beans. Yeah, they're carbs, they're complex carbohydrates, they're loaded with fiber, they're gonna have a low glycemic index. So for those of you watching your blood sugar, beans should be helpful to your blood sugar, but of course, always listen to your doctor. All right, I'm gonna have to take this off of the heat and show you our next step, Cousin Mildred. So you wouldn't have to do this, although I think it's gonna add a really nice umami flavor. Some miso. Ow, wowza, it's dangerous around here. If you're not familiar with miso, it is fermented soybean paste, and it looks like this. So since it's a soy product, you wanna make sure that it's gonna be organic, because soy that's not organic is often genetically modified so that it can be sprayed with glyphosate, and we don't want that. We want organic soy. This is whole soy, so it's not the nasty kind of soy. You don't need to be concerned or worried about eating whole soy products like miso, tempeh, edamame, right? It's just the soy that gets added to convenience foods that we want to stay away from. And this is just a really nice umami flavor, savory, almost kind of meaty, which is one reason I liked it. I'm totally, my glasses are steaming up from these beans. Can you see that? One reason why I like to use miso in my veggie cooking, vegan, plant-based, or vegetarian cooking. If you're not using meat, it just adds a nice little mouthfeel, a nice richness. Yeah, so let me show you. You would kind of do this like, check this out. This is another fantastic gift I got for Christmas, these measuring spoons that are mushrooms. Aren't they awesome? You just scoop a little bit out like this. Yeah, you can make your own miso soup if you've ever been to a sushi place and they've got miso soup. Let me get this out of here. And then, we want to add, I don't know what I'm looking for here, but I'm not finding it. We want to add a little bit of this hot broth. You know what? Here's what I'm looking for. A little bit of the hot pot liquor to the miso so that you can just whisk it and kind of dissolve it a little bit. So it's kind of like if you, I don't know, Mildred, like if you ever cook with cornstarch or if you use flour in gravy, that's what I'm thinking of, what my mom used to do, my grandma. So a little bit more hot broth to kind of dissolve that. Yeah, and then you just stir it in. You stir it into your pot of beans and make sure that it gets all, I'm probably not getting it completely dissolved in there because I don't want to bore you. Now is when I would remove my bay leaf and maybe my thyme sprig, any other little herby twigs that you don't want somebody biting into. Yeah. Hi, Lynn. Thanks for joining us. Now, the piece de resistance to almost everything in our household is some fresh green stuff. So I'm gonna just toss in a handful of fresh spinach leaves. And if I weren't doing this on live TV, I would probably just put the lid on, let it wilt. But again, you guys are probably getting hungry. I know I'm getting hungry. These beans smell amazing. So I'm just gonna kind of stir this in. We keep fresh spinach on hand all the time and toss it into almost everything. There was not necessarily fresh spinach in this recipe, although it might have been a suggestion, but I am definitely gonna add some. Oops, there's another piece of herb I don't want, piece of sage. Okay, let me show you how I'm gonna serve this up. Brothy beans with herbs and miso and lemon. So, scoop my beans in there. Ah, if you can't see, I gotta turn you back down here. Doesn't that look amazing? Gonna give it a squeeze of fresh lemon and then top it with a little bit of fresh dill. Actually, you know what? I almost lied to you. This is fennel fronds from the top of that fennel bulb that I added. Yeah, okay, I wanna give these a taste, although they're very, very hot. Oh, wow. Amazing. You can really pick up the miso, that kind of salty, savory, meaty, real rich taste. These are absolutely delicious. Thanks again to the First Mess for the inspiration for the recipe. I'll post it in the comments. Beans, the magical fruit. The more you eat, the less you might chew. Thank you for joining me for Veg with Lisa Live. See you next week.